Hi, everybody. This is Joe Gigerich again with Christian Holzland. This is the second part to our podcast where we talked about the various choices of where to store content in the Microsoft Cloud. But as we mentioned briefly there and in general, it's all about the user experience, UX, UX, UX. And so once you figure out where to store that content, what you really need to do is deliver that content within a business context in a way that drives adoption. And that is always, always, always user experience. One example I think is pretty evident, Microsoft has gambled on and successfully therein is Teams. When you think about it, Teams is, you have a SharePoint library, you can send emails there, you have a conversation. It's in fact a number of platforms with different content repositories attached to it. But it's driven in the context of a conversation, of a discrete initiative, but of a group of people, right? Where that content is stored and delivered, but with this other functionality wrapped around it. Likewise, in our own sister company, Project Ready drives process over platform. We store content where appropriate. We take advantage of those back-end tools. But Project Ready is hyper-focused on user experience, driving a process, and driving business value therein. So those are two examples that always come to mind for myself, but it extends to a whole bunch of other places, right? So like forms and workflows. And so anyway, so Christian, that's my opening preface. Where would you go from there?
Well, yeah, user experience is a really broad topic, right? And we talk about it a lot because it's the end goal for everything that you adopt in the Microsoft Cloud. And so it's, paramount that you get it right and you can provide an accurate user experience to the people who are using the system that you're providing. So, there's a lot of places that we could go. We could talk about SharePoint Online. We could talk about Power BI. We could talk about workflows, electronic forms, mobile. Where do you want to start? I mean, we've got a lot of places.
Well, let's start right there. One is it's a wide swath, right? Which is, I gave my two quick examples, but you're absolutely right. Like Power BI, at the end of the day, you have data from different places being mashed up and formed. So I don't know if you want to pick up on Teams or do you want to go right for Power BI as an example of use case?
Yeah, Teams is a good place to start because I think it's one of the unique tools in the toolkit that where you have this unification of user experience. It's the one tool when you look at the entire stack where you can build an asset in pretty much any repository and surface it in a team channel. So it's a great place to start. We just did a webcast on, building out a legal review workflow with an extranet in the cloud using Nintex. And where that whole process starts is it starts with an electronic form built in Nintex that's sitting in a tab in Teams. And what's important about that user experience is it's cohesive for the investment team. They have the place where they go, where they collaborate, where they have conversations, where they can upload files and they can work on their content. And in addition to that, you can plug in these business process tools that you're creating into that user experience.
You're taking advantage of that Teams unified user experience. I will pat ourselves on the back as we launched Project Ready. We were doing in kind what Microsoft was, so we felt very well validated. But your point being, though, is that even within these delivered user experiences, like SharePoint, right, modern sites and all that great stuff, that user experience, to really drive it home, you can continue to tailor it and expand it and start to bring in other tool sets. Is that the point?
That's exactly the point. And when you go, a good example of this is you go to the SharePoint conference, you go to Ignite, you go to these Microsoft conferences, and they have these very effective, very well polished intranet homepage designs and layouts. And what they don't show you, because frankly, usually there's just not enough time because they have a lot of content to get through, is that on the surface, it looks very nice. But under the hood, it's designed to be interoperable with other parts of their cloud. So you can take that modern SharePoint Online intranet experience and create a modern page and take that page and surface it in Teams, or take that page and open it on your mobile device, right? Just like you could do with a Nintex form. You could also open that on
and other third parties. I mean,
right, exactly.
fellow I used to know in Nintex years ago, Mike, he talked about it as cloud fabric, right? So it's Lego. The ability to, so with user experience, it gets you away from monolithic, and you have this capacity to start to build and snap together other user experience components.
Yeah. And what you're starting to see a huge trend emerge in the industry is you don't have that same need and drive for the heavyweight customizations of
Yeah,
10 years
monolithic
ago.
dev is kind of gone. Well, maybe in the context of building apps or modern apps, but
Right.
monolithic dev it's dead.
In terms
Monolithic
of building user experience, monolithic dev doesn't have a place anymore. There's no role for it because the tools are so adaptive today. You can create an SPFX web part, drop it into a SharePoint site, load it in a Teams page, pull it up on your phone, and it's just there, right? And you're not building a giant custom ASP.NET web application on the back end to do all that forklifting and page rendering and stuff like that, right? You're just bolting into an existing framework and building out the UX that you need. It's why, Nintex Forms works so well in Teams and why it works so well in SharePoint Online and why it works so well on your phone. You have this platform commonality now. You have this sort of retail effect that's going on in the enterprise side, which is very welcome for me. I appreciate it.
And if I may, for our listeners, this is it's a term set we've been using internally for years, the retail effect. And the retail effect is simply business users, especially as generations gone on, sort of long in the industry and long in the tooth, they got used to buying an app on their phone and that whole user experience. And that was, people talk about digital disruption. That was really the disruption to the way applications and solutions were delivered to the business. The expectations of what retail applications could deliver really started to drive the demands of users with inside the enterprise. So just a point of clarification there. And then just to pick up on Nintex, and then I'm going to sidebar you with another question. So Nintex at that point then allows you to, well, again, was it monolithic dev, unnecessary, dead beast in this regard. And Nintex, also non-monolithic, part of that Lego schema, is a very essential piece of glue, if you will, to build out that larger user experience.
Right. And where Nintex comes in and where tools also like Project Ready come in, we can talk about that a little bit more in depth as well, is Nintex offers a lot of platform automation, but then there's a bunch of other things that it does as well, like Hawkeye for BI reporting. So you can have a form, a Nintex form, and a Teams channel that creates investment data that goes into a Hawkeye cloud database that you then report on an intranet in SharePoint Online with a Power BI web part, right?
Or a tab back in Teams, right?
Right, or the same, and then you can put the same page back in that same channel in Teams, right? And you can do that without writing a single line of code. Literally, you can do that without writing a single line of code. You have to design the form, but you're not writing any code. You're not writing any JavaScript. You're not writing any ASP.NET. You're not writing anything, right? You're putting all these building blocks together, and now you have this end-to-end consistent user experience that really is unprecedented. This is an emerging new frontier for both developers, for power users, for people like me, enterprise architects, who work very closely with clients that do consulting work, people like you, right, who are going out in the marketplace and selling this. We've done tons of custom development projects over the past.
That's where we started 20 years ago, Christian. You were with me.
Right. And they're fun. And you get, you always enjoy kind of solving puzzles and putting things together. But
I never enjoyed managing the budgets, though. I'll tell you that right now.
Right. Yeah, but dealing with change orders and risks, and what if this custom code doesn't do what it's supposed to do? You can start to take those off of the risk register and just get to UX.
Pick up on that. There's a reason why the industry has moved toward cloud, app fabric, and no code, because boy, did that suck to try to figure out scope creep and, waterfall that went askew. So, hence the rise of Agile Life. But there's a huge business driver for these approaches as well. And it's not just Teams, and it's not just Nintex. I mean, Microsoft also has Flow and Power Apps, and again, it's more of the same in terms of supplying the glue to build a more meaningful user experience.
Right. And it really comes down to providing a better user experience at a lower cost with lower risk to all of the parties involved. Because if you're a business liaison, if you're a technical liaison, if you're a vendor, if you're an end user, those little tiny things that go wrong on monolithic dev projects cause ripple effects through the entire user experience.
Yeah. And to the business, the impact on the business, right?
Right.
That's also my contention, is that you can go, well, we can get to a better user experience, but the business needs this bit of functionality. Build it and they won't come, right? So, obviously you can't make it so bloody pretty that you never get to the core functionality of what you intended, what that spend was for. But to park it in the back seat is just an absolute tacit mistake. If you think you're going to get to a solution faster and come back to user experience, ain't going to happen. The other thing that happens that I've noticed over the years too is people go, oh, we'll revisit or we'll change. You get one shot at the plate with users before they no longer trust you. So frankly, better off to get the user experience closer out of the gate and worry about the back end functionality as you go through agile iterations than the other way around. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, and you got to remember that first impressions always count, no matter
exactly.
No matter what area of life you're talking about. And it's certainly no exception in the enterprise software development arena either. When you build a user experience for an end user and you hand it to them and you say, this is what you have now, they take your word for it. They're like, okay, this is what we're using. And with the cloud, with Nintex, with Project Ready, with all these types of tools that you have access to, you can put together that entire cohesive UX from end to end with little to no development effort.
So let me stop you there,
and
because
it's consistent.
I think we have this pretty well established. But let me ask you a question that really, procedurally, how does one go about establishing that correct user experience? Right, it's a non-technical exercise. It's a documentation, a process exercise. But in terms of figuring out what the user experience should be that also supports the business function, talk to me about your experience of how you drive that process and how you take that concept, codify it, and then bring it, regardless of toolkit, back to the business.
So you want me to describe my job?
Well, yeah, that's fine. But it's all.
I appreciate the question. No, I enjoy talking about this because it's critical to the success of an engagement. To start with that question in your mind is, how do we get there, right? So where it begins, it always begins with some vision of you have a team of people and you want them to work smarter, harder, faster, more efficiently, and you have a set of tools at your disposal and you don't know what to do with it, right? You've taken your box of Legos and you poured it all over the floor and you're like, oh man, what do I do, right?
Right. Yeah, so, pre-cut lumber, nails, and a hammer, but that's not a house.
Right, exactly. It's not a house yet, but you need to turn it into a house, right? So what you do is you start compartmentalizing the different user experiences that you have within the cloud. And this is why we've started doing this series.
Let me back up for 1 second.
Where to store data.
Even agnostic of the cloud, that very process. So for instance, right, I'll lead the witness, if you will, is, things I'll say to clients, IT wants to own it or marketing wants to own it. And what I always explain to them, you have to have committees, you have to run things by. That kind of even goes to the agile process. You start, your business requirements documentation, but to always run it past the users. That kind of process and that kind of, as I like to put it, representative democracy, not direct democracy, where you have stakeholders. And so that's the process. Once you go through that will help you select the tools. But can you talk a bit about how you glean that out as we work with clients and drive it home to success?
Right. And specifically what we do, our practice is that we bring these tools to a client, generally through like a workshop type of of project where it's a small engagement, it's a couple of days or it's a day. And basically it's a show and tell. We show people what they have. We'll build something very lightweight. Like
Right.
we'll,
And I got to clarify, we don't go in going, hey, you got to buy this stuff, but based upon what they own, what they've shown interest in, we show the art of the possible. Is that fair?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we want to do. We don't come at it as here's what you should do. We show them here's what you can do with what you already have or own or are looking to acquire if you've already expressed interest in it. So we just want to show people the value that exists. Part of that is taking known use cases like the legal review use case and mocking it up with somebody in real time so that they get that visceral experience of, oh, these are how these things connect together. That gets them thinking about applicability in other parts of their business and where they might see value in leveraging the user experiences present in these tools.
And it's a collaborative conversation, right? The users, what could we do? You're not going to teach them how to use the tool. The IT department explaining or working with them to understand what the tools can do to meet that use case. And that becomes part of not only from the upfront training, which is critical because you want everybody on the same page. You want everybody speaking the same language as they walk in. But even in the agile process, right, that iterates throughout once you start to get into building the like.
It does, right. And one of the fun things that I've noticed working with a lot of our clients is there tends to be more technical acumen on the business end user side than there was in the past. People are starting to get more comfortable with technology. And they're seeing that, you can leverage it like a tool. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to develop things anymore. You can kind of build them, put them together, can snap pieces together. And it's really encouraged a lot of it's helped bridge the gap between.
Well, it's part of that retail effect, which frankly is driven
Right.
by a shift in generation. I mean, I'm 57. I started on mainframes when I was 14, obviously an early adopter, right? And that's why I have a firm as such. But for the most part, with the average worker being between 30 and 50 now, they've grown up with this, which is, I believe, your point. They're
That's
more
what I'm
technically
saying.
savvy. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Just
Yeah, they're more comfortable they're more comfortable with the box of Legos than, we were 10 years ago. But it also stands to note, in fairness to everyone, right? Those Legos are more effective than they were before. There
well,
are frankly there are less of them and they're more effective at working together to provide what the end users are looking for. And
and
you
that's
can
the
get to that vision faster now than you could before, because before you'd have to build something custom and have things wired up and talking to each other. And now you can snap these pieces together and show somebody value in a short order of time without getting stuck in the weeds of coding or building web service calls or things like that. Those
Well, and
components are
even
already
there,
there.
Christian, even if you're building web services calls, I mean, you're not getting rid of some level of development at some point, but it's not monolithic, right? Again, even the web service is componentized. And my point about the cloud, to bring it back to the cloud, and we should wrap soon. I think we both have meetings pretty soon, is that the cloud itself represented that move toward a set of standards, a lingua franca that allows these Lego pieces to snap together. It's not like you're buying, one version of Lego and a knockoff with a different size little hole and peg. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah. And that's what we demonstrate when we put things together like Nintex forms inside of Teams that are sitting inside of SharePoint libraries that are being automated by Nintex Workflow Cloud.
Maybe, and then maybe sent back to an Oracle financial system for that matter, right?
Right, exactly.
Or fetching data from SAP
Yeah,
because of Cloud Fabric.
right. And to speak to your point on, you're not going to get rid of web service calls, and that's right, right? Our focus on this discussion, of course, is on user experience, so we don't want to get too far into that in detail.
Just think the same thing.
But from a project ready standpoint, from an application standpoint, where you have a tailor-made application like Project Ready that handles document control, that handles time and task management, that does specific high-value tasks for a large organization across a portfolio of projects, those plugs are built in behind the scenes, so you can go in and provision a SharePoint site or provision a team, manage them from that application.
And that's where the user experience is the new middleware. Right? Middleware used to be BizTalk and pulling in data sets, and I'm not saying that doesn't have need, although cloud has changed that. But that if you're going to bring together systems, you're bringing it through that user experience now, right? That's really what's the driver, not siloed apps. And you'll let best of breed, be it our product or anybody else's product, or right in modernity. That's really the point, is that the user experience sits across those platforms, should be unifying wherever data is in a way that's invisible to your end user. And so my wrap up on that is, do include your users, and don't, if you had to pick, go with the user experience first and foremost for a consistency perspective as you back in other functions. So we got to wrap up. Christian, any closing comments that you would add as well?
I would say probably nothing really specific to add, other than if you're considering looking at the cloud or you're looking at different tools that are available, just remember the interoperability that you have now that wasn't there before, and think about where you might want things to live so that you have a good vision that you can share with your users, and you can share with somebody if you're bringing them onto your team to help craft a potential user experience that you might want to release.
Gotcha. Yeah, and then bring it all together. So you have choices. You have to make those choices based upon governance, security, price, and applicability of platform. And last and absolutely not least, once you've made those decisions, then you have a way to bring them together if you have a focus on that user experience that will drive it to success. All right, I think we've chewed enough people's ears off, and we both got to bounce. Until next time, and thank you again, everybody, for listening today. This is Joe Gigrich and Christian Holzland from GigWorks. Talk to you next time.